Fishing topwater baits can be both difficult and exciting. Let's join Larry as he fishes a floating worm in today's lesson, Power Floating.
Boy, there's just something about that floating worm that I'm telling you, this looks like it's going to be a heck of a day. Just pop that thing along and pause it. Oh, and he come out there and got him right on the edge of them lily pads. And another nice fish too. I mean a nice fish. Look at that. What a, just a beautiful fish. Dark and full. It's been in that shallow water. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's amazing that in floating worms, the colors that produce the best, and probably 90% of the situations are the bright colors, like white, yellow, fluorescent orange. I've got some laid out there to try. I didn't know which color I was going to be throwing. But white, to me, it's one of them that works best most of the time, and I can't answer that question why. It's kind of like spinnerbaits. A white spinnerbait is always a good choice. I just give him a couple twitches and let him fall. Pop him, let him fall. He's a real easy bait to fish with. And it's one of them lures that everybody that bass fishes, if you fish a lot of shallow water, I mean stock ponds, rivers, creeks, places that have a little bank vegetation, boy, it's a good choice for a lot of fishing days. You can do so many things with it. Some days the fish are real aggressive, and I mean, I'll just work him just almost like a spook. He just kind of walks back and forth just like a spook. And then other days, even when the fish are shallow, you've got to pause it and let it sink. Pop it up beside a bush or maybe right on the edge of a little old rock drop off. When you get it right there where you feel like the fish is at, just stop and let it sink. Well, they can't stand that old slow sinking worm.
When fishing a floating worm in shallow water, brighter colors such as white will usually produce the best.
Where you at? Nice fish. I like to throw this type of lure here on spinning tackle simply because it's not as hard to cast. Look how black that one is. It's very easy to cast on spinning tackle, and I usually throw it on fairly light line because I'm fishing in water that's real clear. Boy, he's pretty. I mean, he is coal black. I usually throw it on light line, or, well, today I'm throwing it on fire line simply because that fire line has very little stretch. And when I'm fishing a floating worm, a lot of times the fish gets it, I'm out of position with my rod. So I'll always throw it on the fire line because it doesn't have any stretch like monofilament does. And when I set the hook, no matter where they are, you make quick contact with that bass.
Try fishing a floating worm on spinning tackle. Use a line with little stretch, such as Berkeley Fire Line. This will help you make contact with the fish much quicker when your rod is out of position.
George, he roared out of there and ate it, didn't he? I mean, just flew out of there and got it. Yeah. Do the back jump and the front jump. Oh, he was active. Yeah, he was active. Pretty healthy little bass. A lot of fun. jumped in all directions. Whoops, tore up my little worm. Well, that's the spare one I've already got rigged up. Anytime I first start fishing on a lake that has clear water and I've got a good cloudy day and very little wind, there's usually always one of 3 or 4 baits that's going to produce for me. A topwater, a spinnerbait, a buzzbait, a floating worm. You know, any one of them 4 can be your key lure for that certain day. But the one thing that really makes me think about a floating worm more than anything else is fishing pressure and time of the year. If it's early in the year, a spinnerbait will probably catch every bass that a floating worm would. But later in the year, as more and more people go fishing and they're throwing spinnerbaits, then fish get harder to catch. They get a little, they just get harder to catch, period. And to me, that's one of the times when a floating worm will outproduce anything else. They don't want noise, they don't want speed, they want something that's subtle. And you just twitch it through the water and you stop it. And it just kind of sits there. Here they come. Holy cow! Hold on, big boy. Now this is a real fish right here. I'm gonna tell you right now, this is a real bass. Look at the size of this hog. Holy cow. What a jump. Oh, I got him on that spinning tackle. That's a big old fish on spinning tackle. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, I got my reel in back pedal mode. Looky here. Golly, what a big old bass. Look at the head on that dude. Man, that's a bass. That was fun. Thank you, Mr. Bass. Go get you a big old shad. Go find you a big old minnow and fatten up. Boy, that was exciting. That was one of them that I couldn't even see him get the bait. It was kind of a riffle there, and the direction I was throwing, I couldn't see real good. In fact, I didn't even expect to get a bass on that cast. I just went to work my worm, and the line was tight, and I said, uh-oh, I better jerk. He was a nice one. One of the things that'll really help you as a fisherman to get more distance when you're fishing light lures like the power float worm is the diameter of the spool that is on your spinning reel. The T3000F, if you'll notice, it has a big spool, and what this allows the line to do is to come off the spool much better. So when you make a cast, you'll get that longer cast, plus you'll get fewer loops when you flip your reel into gear, and you won't have to worry about that little loop coming off on your next cast, but it'll really help you be a better bass fisherman. Remember now, when you're fishing floating worms, to use a small swivel about 6 to 8 inches above your lure if you're keeping your worm up high. I mean, when you're working it along, if you're keeping it up close to the surface, use a very small swivel in your line. That'll eliminate line twist. Now, if most of your strikes seem to come as you stop it and allow that worm to sink, then go to a little bit larger swivel, and that'll get it down there if the fish are down 4, 5, 6 feet under the surface. Grandma might live back here. And then again, it could be another one of them situations where I'm too far back. Getting close to where the little channel winds back in them pads. And might be, usually one old big fish owns a little ditch like this. Big fish like little ditches. One old big bass sometimes will take up a residence back in an area like this, and there won't be any other bass back there, but there'll be one great big one. Like right down the mouth of that cut. Uh-oh. There was one back there. I don't know whether it's grandma or not, but yeah, it's a good grandma. Come out from under the boat, you big outfit, you. There you go. Well, it ain't grandma, but she's close. That's what I mean about one fish owning an area well. Come on. Now that's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, that little cut right there is just tailor-made for a big fish, and that was what was in it. Good bass. Yep, that was her house. Got good cover and access to deep water. A little spot like that, I mean, even though it don't look like much, I mean, it does, it really does, it looks good. Looks good, to, you know, for my eyes. If Grandma's got a sister back there. Usually that'll be the only one. That's not a good pattern for tournament fishing, I mean, unless there's a lot of them little cuts on a body of water, a lot of them little one fish spots. If there's a bunch of them, it's all right. But them kind of fish right there in a tournament practice usually get caught off, and by the time tournament starts, they're not very dependable. Well, once you get your limit, then you start running these types of places and hope you can figure out how to catch some of them bass after the pressure is hit. Because that's where you get your weights, them old big fish. One of the big differences that I see in tournament fishing and pleasure fishing is after 2 or 3 days of practice, you've got to make a major decision as to whether there's a certain pattern that you think other fishermen have found during practice and probably pretty much wiped out during that 3-day concentration of fish, and whether anybody else has found it. Tournament competition is where you have to find fish that other people don't find very easily, and that's the kind of fish that I look for. Just fun fishing. To me, fun fishing is going to the same area every day and figuring out what the bass are doing every day, because a lot of times that's what makes a good fishing trip, is just not worrying about the competition and going out there and just being patient and fishing your different lures and figuring out what the fish are doing that day. You get more whoop out of that worm if he's longer. I saw one coming up behind that thing. I knew you was there. Yes, I did. Saw that water hump up, and I just stopped it and let it sink. What a jump. I mean, see, if I hadn't been observant there and watched that water hump up behind that worm, I wouldn't have caught this fish. Well, would you come here? Yep, I wouldn't have caught you had I not been looking real close and just saw that water just kind of raise up behind that worm. And I stopped it and let it sink. And that worm just went, disappeared. When that worm disappears, set the hook. You gotta be observant and pay attention. Now, you can have fun and not be quite so observant, but if you want to be a good fisherman, be observant. Watch your lure. Watch everything in that water. Because if I hadn't stopped it, I would not have got that fish right there. He run up and looked at it, and he just really kind of didn't want it, and I stopped it and let it sink, and I mean, he eat it.
Being observant is an important key to bass fishing. Pay close attention to your lure and your surroundings. Sometimes this can be the most important key to a productive day.
When fishing floating worms, it really seems like the brighter colors work better most of the time. And I can't tell you why. I can't answer that. I wouldn't dream of putting either one of these worms on a Texas rig and throwing it out there and fishing it on the bottom. But yet when I'm throwing it and working it up close to the surface and I'm working it with an erratic motion, it just seems like the brighter colors work best. Now you will find a time sooner or later in a very highly fished area that you'll have to go to a more subtle color, like maybe a green pumpkin or a natural brown color to make the fish bite it. But 90% of the time, I throw worms that are bright colors. Took the rod out of my hand when he pulled. He hit the water with the afterburners going. Well, would you just come on out from under there? He's whooping me. It's what you call getting your... He's so fat and big he can't even get his body out of the water. You gonna try it again or what? Come here, you biggin'. Doggone, he's strong. I mean, that one is a strong. Look what a belly on that bass. See, this fish here come out of a little deeper water. Ain't that a pretty bass? I mean, a good one. Hadn't been living up in them lily pads. She come out of deep water and thought that was a shad, but boy, is she healthy. Man. That was a really good fish. I can tell you right now, I hope you've had as much fun as I have today fishing this Berkley Power Float Worm, because it really is a great bait. And not only that, but it is a lot of fun to fish. Come see me again next week and I'll try to make you a better bass fisherman.